Sometimes I think graphic designers don't really give enough credit to shape layers inside of After Effects. For this graphic right here, we use shape layers to add a little bit more interest to this title, rather than just having plain text as we have these color bars. So now in our project today, we're going to animate the appearance of these different color bars, and in the process we're going to take the animation a little bit further by adding a little wiggle to the shapes to make it look a bit more hand-drawn like traditional cell animation. Let's jump into the animating shape layers composition. In here, notice we've already created a shape layer. If you don't have access to the exercise files, literally just make sure no layers are selected, and then go up to your shape tool and click and drag to create a new shape. Now with our shape layer selected in layer 2, I'm going to go ahead and create 4 rectangles. So let's open up layer 2 and make sure that we can select rectangle 1. If you don't see rectangle 1, open your contents area and select rectangle 1. When you select a specific shape layer inside the contents section of a shape layer, you can actually create duplicates of that shape just by dragging with the selection tool and holding down Alt or Option on the Mac or PC. So I'm going to hold down Shift as I drag just to make sure it snaps to the axis. Let's go ahead and repeat this again. Option on the Mac, Alt on the PC and drag. Notice every time I hold down Alt or Option, I'm getting the double arrows letting me note that I'm making a copy. This is the same function you would use in Illustrator, so if this looks relatively familiar, that's why. If we look at the top of our shape layers, we have fill options up here. I bring this up because I want to replicate the colors from our example scene, but I don't necessarily want to have to open up the rectangle options and go to the fill section and make an adjustment every single time. So let's just make sure our rectangle 4 is collapsed and take one more look at our example frame. So we go blue, green, orange, magenta. So let's go here. We'll start with blue. So here let's select our second rectangle, and this will be green. Now I'm going to pause for a second. When I'm working inside of After Effects and I know what my color palette is going to be, I actually go ahead and create layer solids with those colors. This way I have a quick and easy way to access that color palette and use it in other parts of my project. So if we click on the fill options with our second rectangle selected, we can open up our color picker, and here we have our eyedropper. So let's go ahead and choose this green option and click OK. Let's click in the composition one more time to select our next rectangle. This will be orange, so we'll click on the fill again, grab our eyedropper and click orange. Now we click OK. Let's click on the fourth rectangle and repeat the same command, making sure we choose magenta. Now that we've created our rectangles and we have the proper colors, we can go ahead and line these up with our text layer. So let's scroll up to layer 1 and turn its visibility back on. Again, as you're working with multiple shape layers, make sure you have your contents open so you can click directly on any given shape. As long as you have the selection tool active, you can resize that shape. Now I'm just going to make our shape a little bit larger than what we need. So I will scale this up here and click reposition. Click on orange and reposition that up there a little bit. If I wanted to change the layer hierarchy, say for example I wanted this green to overlap the orange a little bit, I could just click and drag on the rectangle in the contents panel and bring it up over the other layer. You can see that you can change the visible hierarchy directly within a shape layer itself when you have more than one shape. Let's click on our final shape here and just resize that and move it out. I just want to add a little bit more variation between these, so I'm just going to change the sizes a little bit more. I think that looks pretty good. Actually, I want this blue to overlap the green. We'll go ahead and drag that up to the top of my hierarchy. Okay, there we go. Let's click off any of the rectangles so we can get a preview. Now if you remember our sample composition, the text was not white, and that's because we were using a track matte. If you don't have your switches and modes set up to see your track mattes, go ahead and toggle your switches and modes, and then change the track matte for layer 2 from none to alpha inverted matte. This will go ahead and cut out the text. Now to quickly animate our shape layers, again with the contents window open, let's grab our selection tool and select our first rectangle. Go ahead and enable automatic keyframing so we can set keyframes. I'm going to set my first keyframe last, so let's move to frame 12 and then just quickly move our shape. I'm going to do that for each of the layers. I'll just quickly move that shape. Whenever you stop moving the layer around, that will be the value for that keyframe. Now let's go back to frame 0 and reposition each of these layers outside of the view of the comp panel. So we're going to click back up to the first rectangle here, and I'll drag this off to the right. If you hold shift after you drag, it'll snap on its axis. Now select layer 2 and press the U key or the Uber key to see all your keyframes. If you turn off automatic keyframing, now we can easily and quickly adjust the timing of each of these rectangles. So let's go ahead and click and drag with our current time indicator so you can see how this is flowing through the scene. I'm going to select rectangle 4 just so I know where it sits in the layer hierarchy. Since its visibility is controlled by its position vertically, I'm not going to reposition it at the bottom the way I usually would if I were focusing on trying to remember the order visually in the comp panel. So with rectangle 4 selected, let's draw a lasso around those two keyframes and just drag them down the timelines. Let's click on rectangle 2. Okay, this will be the second one we want to animate. So let's go ahead and just drag those a few frames down the timeline. However far apart you'd like to drag your different shapes, feel free to drag them in the timeline. I'm just creating a rough animation, so as we can see we have our two layers come in and then our next two. Now we're almost finished. By all means we could add an ease to these layers so they slide in very easily, but I want to add one more thing, and that's the wiggle effect. Let's collapse layer 2 and open layer 2 one more time, just so we can get to the contents panel. I'm going to collapse rectangle 1, rectangle 4, rectangle 2 and rectangle 3. Go ahead and select the contents panel because we're going to go ahead and group all 4 of these layers. So with content selected, go up under add and choose group. Now with group 1 at the bottom of the hierarchy, go ahead and click on rectangle 3. Hold down shift and click on rectangle 1. Now with all 4 rectangles selected, drag them into group 1. Now that they are all in group 1, go ahead and click on that word and go back over to add. This time we should choose wiggle paths. With wiggle paths selected, let's just deselect any of the rectangles by clicking off in the timeline somewhere else. Now as I start dragging, notice I'm getting a little bit of a wiggle to my graphics as they move around the scene. Now obviously they're all moving at the same rate right now. If I wanted to make an adjustment to that, I could maybe create 2 groups and put different shapes in different groups. The wiggle path options will appear at the bottom of the group. This is where you can control how quickly the wiggle changes, as well as the size and the amount of detail. So now that we've got our basic animation set up, let's go ahead and load up a RAM preview. So if you wanted to keep pushing things, you could definitely edit your keyframes in the graph editor, or maybe animate the appearance of the text itself. But I hope you can see now that shape layers are relatively powerful, and as long as you just take your time and use some of the different basic controls in the composition panel and create fun animations like this in no time.